Hey, what's up guys? Tom from Positive Lead Diagnostics. I'm at a friend's shop. This car was here, what, 2 weeks ago? You've had this car about 2 weeks?
Yep.
Alright, so this is a 2004 Golf R32. It has a 3.2 liter VR6 in it. It came in with intermittent faults. It had a P1340 cam crank correlation fault and a P0346, or it didn't have the 346.
It may have. I don't remember.
P0346 exhaust cam position sensor circuit range performance. Both intermittent faults, and my friend read a bulletin that the upper timing chain stretches. So my friend did a timing chain job. He used all the special tools, the cam locks. There's no crank lock.
No.
There's just a shaved tooth on the crank, and you line that up with a bearing cap.
Main bearing cap.
Main bearing cap, you line that up. That goes to an intermediate shaft or the oil pump, right?
Intermediate shaft, which has an arrow and another line on it.
Okay. Basically what I'm saying is, my friend who did the timing chain job, it was spot on. Cams were locked. All the marks on the chain, all the arrows that you need to line up, everything was lined up. So he puts the car back together, and he has two faults now static.
Yep.
Cam crank correlation and the P0346. Let me get you a shot of these faults. Alright, so ignore these two. This was from us unplugging. The cam position sensor, G163 implausible signal, P0346, and then we have the P1340 cam crank correlation fault. Both of those were static after doing the timing chain job. Those are the faults after doing the timing chain job. Those faults are now static. They were intermittent before. Here was the thing, the car ran perfect. So like I said, he had all the cam locks in, all the marks on the chain, everything was lined up perfect. So he calls me down, and obviously you guys have seen other videos that I've done. Anything with cam sensor, first thing you do is check the signal. If you have a signal, go straight for timing, and that's what we did. I'll show you the waveforms of the cam crank relation when I first came down. Alright, so this is the cam crank waveform that we took off the car initially. The blue trace is my crank, the yellow trace is my exhaust, and the green trace is my intake cam. So you want to get 720 degrees of the crank and find a reference point where the cams cross over this crank sync. So we can see the intake is the green. It looks like it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 teeth away from this cranksink. And we can say the exhaust is maybe, including this, the high tooth, 2 teeth away. So this is the original waveform that we have off of the car that is throwing the cam crank correlation and the exhaust cam sensor faults. I do have a known good. The only difference is it's a 3.6 liter GDI. It's basically the same engine, just has a different fuel injection, and it's a little bit bigger. So there wasn't any known good for a 3.2 liter on IATN, so I just used the known good that I had from the 3.6. Let me show you that one. Alright, so here is the known good 3.6. On this one, the yellow trace is my crank, the blue trace is the blue trace. Let's say the blue trace is my exhaust, and the green trace is my intake. So we'll find this reference point right here. So you can see the intake, the green trace, dead center of that cranksink. That's different from what we had. And the exhaust, it looks like this leading edge of this second square, maybe about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teeth away. Let's go back to the other one. So we can see this intake nowhere near center of the cranksink, and also the exhaust nowhere near where it should be. So just by looking at that, we can say that the cams are off from the crank. So then we thought, well, what about the cams? Okay, maybe it moved a tooth because the chain goes from the crank up to the oil pump, and then there's another chain that goes from the oil pump to the cams, so maybe we lost a tooth somewhere in there. Let's look at the cams. Are those in sync with each other? So we went back to the known good. And what we were looking at was the intake cam, the smaller square, looks like it was in between a small square on the exhaust and then in between a larger square. So we went back to the other one. So on this one, we're looking for the intake to be in between the exhaust. And on this one, the exhaust, it's nowhere near it. So what I'm saying is also our cams were out of sync too, which kind of left us scratching our head. All right, so what we're looking at the cams together, we're looking at the cam and the crank together, everything is off. The car runs fine. There's no way we're going to have everything out of whack and the car runs perfect. Looking at the waveform, we just noticed a big difference in which cam basically came first, if I could word that.
So location on the graph.
Yeah, so location of the cams on the graph, let me show you that. Alright, so this is the 3.2 that's throwing faults. The green trace is my intake, and the yellow trace is my exhaust. And in relation to where this cranksink is, the intake square waves start before the exhaust, or in front of the exhaust square waves in relation to the crank, or even in relation to each other. You see the intake square waves before the exhaust square waves. Now let me show you on the 3.6. So in this one, the intake is the green and the exhaust is the blue. And this is the known good one. The exhaust is in front of the intake. Let me go back to the other one. So on this one, the green is the intake, yellow is the exhaust, and the intake is in front on this one. Keep getting confused of the colors again. Alright, so on the timing faults, intake is in front of the exhaust, and on the known good, the exhaust is in front of the intake. So right there, kind of threw a red flag. So we kind of went back over the timing chain procedure, and I was just thinking about cam phasers and what the windows look like on them. Do you still have the phasers. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let me show you the phasers. All right. So these are the exhaust phasers. When my friend did the timing chain job, he replaced both of them. So the question is, how does this car run perfect? There's no way that timing could be off this badly on our scope and this car runs. Car runs fine. So my first question was, hey man, is it possible that these could be swapped, and are they different? Try to find right here. So right here, it's hard to see. It says 32A right here in front of my thumb. And on this one, right here, it says 24E. So they are different. Set them up like that. And when you set them up side by side, there are dowel pins in the back. Those are lined up perfectly right now, so these cam actuators are sitting the same, and you can see the windows are different. So my question, dude, could these actuators be swapped? So my buddy said he needed to tear it down, and I told him to let me know what he found, and let me put up the picture because the car is obviously back together now. Alright, so you saw the picture. Both of the cam actuators were swapped by mistake. They look identical. The dowel pins, honestly, we were talking about it from an engineering standpoint. There should have been a different key on these so they couldn't be swapped. So just a small mark that was overlooked. Cam actuators are swapped and the windows are different. So my buddy ripped it back apart, and he didn't have to get too invasive with it, but he was able to swap the cam actuators without ripping everything back down, just taking the upper chain loose.
Upper chain off and valve cover.
Okay, so valve cover.
Case.
This is one of those ones you don't want to have to go back and rip apart. What the front end has to come off, the intake manifold is one piece, that's a pain to get off. Then the valve cover has to come off. This is one you don't want to fool around with and waste time. So I'm hooked up to both cam sensors, cranks down below. Let me get you a shot of the new waveform cam crank relation with the cam actuator swapped back. You know what's nice is we were able to actually reference using that 3.6 liter. At least I had that we used as a reference. You know, it's not going to be spot on.
Yeah, but gave us a good idea.
Yeah, good idea what to look for and seeing the cams flip flop.
Yep.
Or do you want to start it up?
No, sure.
Thanks. All right, so this is going to be the new let it run for a bit. Let that button run a little bit. Alright guys, so this is with the cam actuator swap. This would be a known good. Green is my intake, yellow is my exhaust. This one isn't exactly the same as the 3.6, but we were lucky enough to have the 3.6. It was close enough. And the intake is just on the high tooth of this cranksink, and the second big square wave of the exhaust is maybe 3 teeth out. So this would be a known good. Alright, so the new waveform looks very similar to the 3.6. This would be a known good. My friend has already cleared the faults. He's already road tested it. This vehicle is fixed. I'm doing this video in hindsight, obviously, because he's really busy at his shop and sometimes didn't have time to, for me to come down, and timing just wasn't right, just like this car. Or was it? The timing was right. The cams were swapped.
Bad inputs equals bad outputs.
Yeah. So, just be careful doing a timing change job. Cam actuators can be swapped. So I just thought this was a good one. Seeing the cams flipped on the waveform, pay attention to waveforms. This wasn't actually a timing issue. The vehicle wasn't timed, it ran smooth. This was an input issue because the windows on the cam actuators are different. So this vehicle was fixed, and it's a pretty cool one, I thought. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.